We have some questions from the audience, and I would like to start with Jason. The question is, as a successful entrepreneur, what's the one piece of advice you have for someone looking to launch their business in Hong Kong?
Well, first of all, congratulations, you have chosen the right place. I think in Hong Kong, with all the speakers expressing, the unique points about Hong Kong, there are 2 or 3 more that you have to keep in mind, and perhaps that will give you some insight of what is the best thing that you need to do. I think the other 2 advantages that were not mentioned yet about Hong Kong, number 1, I think, is Hong Kong has China. I think it's very interestingly how we always frame questions so that we compare ourselves to China. The development of internet and the economy and all that in China is very fast, so how do we as Hong Kong as a city position ourselves? But I think in fact Hong Kong and China are sort of one, and our advantage, one of the biggest advantages, is actually China. So if your business, when you set up in Hong Kong, can take advantage of that element, it would be the best thing that you can do for your business. So China as an advantage. The other I would say is the fact that Hong Kong is in a very interesting times. Earlier, at the beginning of my sharing, I talked about the opportunity in Belt and Road and also Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Bay Area. Our parents' generation actually have opportunities to go into China and tap into the opportunity, look for blue oceans, find the pain points and problems to solve for China, in China, make products for the world 30 to 50 years ago. 20 years ago, our earlier generation of the internet and mobile innovators, that generation started the internet and created many big companies. 7 of the biggest 10 companies in market capitalization are all technology companies created around that time. And now we are having a very interesting opportunity. Geographically, if you start in Hong Kong, you should think about how to address and ride on those 2 strategic opportunities which China is helping to drive. Belt and Road and also the Guangdong, Hong Kong and Macau Bay Area. So think about these 2, and of course, I think Wes talked about the speed as in our DNA. I would say Hong Kong is very talented, but is also lacking a lot of talent. And this is an opportunity where we can actually get the East and the West here in Hong Kong and then make something great for the world.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to Eric. With global consumers' rising concerns on product safety and increase in demand of product safety tests, what are your company's plans to expand overseas?
Right. Actually, our company start overseas because when we started, we start from working with testing labs like SGS, Tube, and cosmetic companies like L'Oreal overseas. So we start from the international market to build our credibility. And 2 years ago, and we think the time is right, so we start penetrating into China. And just like what Jason mentioned, Hong Kong has its advantage that it has a very good branding effect. Production and manufacturing is not its advantage, but it has very good branding effect. So we make use of this branding effect to publish the safe report, to have this safe product data platform. And then the 1.5 billion people in China are keen to trust the platform and the information from Hong Kong. So we make use of the credential and credibility we gain from the international market. And then we make use of the population advantage in China to build our platform. In the end of the day, what we envision is Google and Baidu is like the go-to source for information. And Didi, Uber is like the go-to source for transportation. WeChat and Facebook is like the go-to source for social media. And we aspire to be the platform and go-to source for safe products.
Thank you very much. I saw some of the labels I know from Europe, like SGS and the TÜV, the German ones. Do you already have cooperations with them in place, or they use?
Yes, we have. They have endorsed our method, and actually we keep receiving buyout offer from them. They recognize biotesting is the trend. To make it very analogy is that nowadays you are using machine to tell if the product are safe or not. They're missing the biotesting data. And what we are believing is that biotesting and bio data should be with every product. Otherwise, we are using ourselves, our family, and our children to test for the products. So we believe this will be the trend, but it's a matter of time, because whenever you try to establishing a new standard, it takes time for the industry, for the government to react. But what we are also innovating is that we are making use of the consumer power. Because as you can see in many of the new unicorn, like Uber, like Airbnb, they are not only strong with the technology, but they are also very good at making use of the consumer power to pressurize or incentivize the industry and government to endorse the new standard. So what we are believing is that in the past, it may take 10 or 20 years for the industry to endorse this kind of new testing standard. But with consumer power, with internet, we can make it into 3 years or 4 years. And the benefit is huge, because the later the standard it comes, the more people will be suffering. I mean, we are using more children, using more our family members to test for the toxic products. So we believe, I mean, that's why we call biotech plus internet, and with this big data will be very useful for the society.
Thank you. One question goes to Wesley. We've learned from your presentation that you have experiences in Hong Kong and in many different places of different cultures as well. So what are the differences between the East and the West? The very old question. And can the East and West learn anything from each other? And if so, what?
I think back in the days, there are cultural differences from the East to the West. But with the internet, right, globalization, right, and I think the gap is, you know, slowly, or probably quickly narrowing down. You know, the millennials in Hong Kong, I see the behaviors very much like the same of the millennials in the States, where they dress the same, they listen the same stuff, and they like the same things. And there is a huge opportunities for us in Asia. You know, back in the days, it's a huge barrier understanding the different culture in the West. But now with globalization, with the internet, you know, you don't need that, you know, because all the millennials, they behave similarly, you know. I mean, if you look at the social media, all the millennials on Friday, they always complain about, oh no, on Friday, they always say, hey, thank God it's Friday, right? Don't you see that on the social feed, right? And on Monday, they always say, hey, you know, it's Monday and all that, you know, so they behave the same. So I guess like East and the West, there is no East and West anymore, I guess, you know, going ahead. Yeah.
Oh, we get many questions. We go back to Jason, I think. It's on property. The question is, when the design of shopping center layout is based on the data collection, but the sale outcome can't be reached as expected, how does your company deal with this situation?
Yeah, let me see if I understand the question correctly. It means that once we have made certain suggestions about the design of the venue,
I would understand it like
and
this.
then it turns out that it wasn't that way, then what happened? Is that, okay. Well, first of all, right now, we are collecting data from a lot of venues, right? So, which is another advantage of Hong Kong. Probably the highest density of shopping malls in the world are in Hong Kong, vertically built. And with that data, we try to propose suggestions, right? So an architect architecture company, which we are working with a few global ones, would come to us and say, hey, we are going to design a new shopping mall. So there are two levels of designs. One is the actual shopping mall from scratch itself. And the second is once the shopping mall is built, where in each shop, you can put in different tenants, right? So that's the second level of design. Let's talk about the second level. If the shops were certain shops and you collect data over time and it tells you that, oh, one of the hypotheses should be you should put the shop this way, where cinemas is on the top, luxury shopping then beneath it, and all the others comes at the ground floor, etc. Now, this is, remember, backed up by data. So unless there's a change of shopping habits, or unless the arrangement of shop or the brands itself cause a new behavior to be shown in the new data, it should be the truth because it's based on data. So the hypothesis itself is data-backed, and once the data show you that, oh, perhaps there is a new and a better way to arrange these shops, you make it happen, and afterwards you measure it again. There is, again, when you measure it, it's the real data. So unless there is a new behavior that emerged because of the brand itself, right? So the answer to that question is, yes, there may be such issue. What you do is you just continue to pivot. And there are seasonality, there are trends, and there are evolution of behavior of consumers. As Eric talked about, you know, technology is great, but the most important thing is to connect with the consumers. And in my presentation, we talk about loyalty is artificial. It's habits that make sense. So you constantly measure these habits and pivot to the new ones that make sense, and then you try to converge to what the customer is looking for.
Thank you very much. The next question goes to Eric. We take turns here. We've heard a lot about China and Hong Kong and the integration, how this works together as sort of one big cluster. The question here is, please elaborate on your success in mainland China and what level of achievements and obstacles you have encountered. That was the first question. And the second one from the same attendee is how you were talking with the regional governments in various places in mainland China. Have you done so, and how have they reacted?
Great question. I think Jack Ma once mentioned saying that the relationship with the government should be dating, not marriage. So in our opinion, we need to keep a very good relationship with the government, especially in mainland. As you can see, the product safety sector is a very sensitive area. There have many people very concerned about safety, and this is not just like food safety issue, it's about social security issue. So that's why you can see, if you have the chance to go to our website and follow our Facebook, you can see every time, for now, we only publish the green fish. We don't publish the red fish. Actually, we get inspiration from Switzerland because they have a very famous index called Dow Jones Sustainable Index. We went to, when we won the Geneva Award, we also went to meet the founders of the Sustainable Index, later acquired by Dow Jones Index. Because at that time we were thinking, if there was an index for sustainability, there should be an index for food safety as well. So we went to meet the team there. And they shared the experience with us that they also start with by celebrating the winners only. For example, they will say these are the top 10 companies that are doing great. These are the one that winning the second place. So we're taking this inspiration to celebrate the winners only. And this also gives incentivize for the one that not on the winning list and to also strive to be the winning list. So I think the first thing is that we need to understand the culture difference and the concern from the government. Sometimes it's not that the government don't want to take aggressive action, but they need to take care of the benefit from many stakeholders, the people, the workers, the supply chain, etc. So we understand that. So we need to do it step by step. We need to live long enough to see the change. We are not that very aggressive to announce which milk powder are not safe, and then we get shut down the next day. We need to live long enough to make change for the society. So I think the conclusion is that we need to understand the culture, respect the culture, and work with the government. Well, of course, I think Hong Kong government can also be very helpful, and we are very grateful that they have a lot of support to give us a nice place in Science Park, and TDC also helping us to promote us to different places overseas. And if the government can also endorse our technology faster, that will be also very happy. Because last 2 months, the chief executive is very helpful that they launched a new scheme to support the startup company, to support the tech startup. So we think people, I mean, some reporters are asking us, say, oh, do you think this package is useful? Can it solve the issue? So my first reaction is that once the government are willing to make this gesture, it's already very good, because you can't rely on the government itself to do everything. So I think overall we are very positive for what the Hong Kong government is doing.
Thank you very much. This leads the discussion towards intellectual property issues. And I have questions in this area for all of you. The first one goes to Wesley, and that's the celebrity thing. How do you deal with copyright intellectual property issues when publishing celebrity and personal data on a commercial product?
Yeah. So the question is intellectual property and celebrities. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the questions that we got asked most is, hey, it's a commodity, it's a consumer products. It's very easy to get copy, right? And that's true. You might go on the site, other site, to search for a brand. There are copycats already, right? But they're more than that. The users go to your site, they understand your brand values, the quality that you stand for, and they wouldn't risk their phone for some really low quality products. And that's what we, as a brand, that's what we want to build. Not just a product, but a brand that stands for quality and a message. And for us, we always celebrate individuality. We believe everyone is unique. So, and I guess, especially the millennials, right? They buy why you do it. They don't buy, just a nice products. And I guess that's a lot of traditional companies, traditional retailers are having problems with, because the millennials are not shopping like the old, like the traditional way. They are buying more of, they have a new sort of behavior in terms of purchasing. And that's what we're learning, and that's what I would say we're very focusing on.
Thank you very much. Going back to Chase and also on intellectual property, the question here is, how easy is it for you to comply with the relevant data protection law? In particular, it says with the new EU regulation that comes into force in May 2018. And the other one would be, how much time and financial efforts do you employ to prevent cyber attacks?
Great questions. There are actually 3 questions in there. Well, first of all, the intellectual property in terms of technology, we file patents to protect our invention, of course, and both software, hardware, and the methodology in data analytics. So in this area, I think it's relatively straightforward. Hong Kong is very good in this kind of professional services in assisting companies to file intellectual properties, patents, trademarks, whatnot, to China and the US and then globally. So the second question is, how do we comply with privacy and personal data regulation around the world? This one, I think we tackle it quite in a quite straightforward fashion. First of all, consumer data has to be highly respected and consent needs to be given. But most importantly, we anonymize the data. So we actually drop everything about the personal data. We just take that device as it is rather than device related to the user itself, himself or herself. So we take away a lot of relevant issues around personal data that way. But in spite of that, in the US and in Europe, there are a lot more regulations related to just the collection of data, any data, of users. So even if you have consent and you're anonymizing the data, then there are still a lot of restriction about taking data. So that's where we provide personalized service for the users. Now, when the users choose to take a service like a wayfinding on AR or a flight alert service or the next train alert service, then they are proactively taking a service by themselves rather than just being collected data. So that would give us the richest set of anonymized data that we can collect without just taking or tracking users. Now, in different parts of the world, the extent to which we can exercise data collection is different, but we are certainly working with the associations, the regulators, and also the venue owners to comply with all of them. The idea is to not intrude into the personal data and privacy, but to provide a more intelligent service, ultimately back to the consumer, right? And the third question, I'm not too sure, but the third question I think is related to how we...
Cyber attacks?
Cyber attacks,
How
yeah.
you protect your systems?
One of the things that is always going to be there is the security on the internet. And with Internet of Things, the new devices with the standards like LIDAR, LoRa, and so on, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, there will be more vulnerabilities. And you will see viruses that are not going to your phones, but to venues, device, vehicles. I still remember the day when a hacker announced on the internet the hijack of a Tesla car. So it completely takes over the Tesla car. And for the electronics not to be in control, the car is dead, right? Is hijacked. So I think this issue will always be there. It is not an issue just for location intelligence. What it takes is the entire industry to join hands in battling that, in providing better encryption, better measures, and better protection, creating standards where devices, vehicles, and sensors can follow. We are also part of setting a standard for airport and railways on location intelligence. It's called ATLAS, Airport and Transit Location as a Service, together with Hong Kong International Airport and Mass Transit Railway. So we are doing our part in cyber attack or countering cyber attack.
The question went even further. It asked how much time and financial efforts do you spend on these activities?
It's difficult to quantify because I don't think there is a functional task on, okay, well, we develop a product and then now we deal with the cybersecurity. It has to be right from the beginning at the design. So I think it's an integral part of the entire effort. So if you were to specifically say how much we dedicate to it, I think it is increasing over time. Probably very hard to pinpoint a percentage, but I would say 1/3 right from the beginning design stage all the way to deployment, testing, and regular updating. And your scrambling encryption that you do regularly over all the sensors that you have installed, and so on and so forth. So I would say 1/3 if I were to put a number, but it's very hard to segregate that.
Okay, sounds a lot, huh? Okay. The next question goes to Eric. We have a lot of legal issues here, obviously. The question is there a conflict of interest there that you offer testing and consulting and certification and issuing reports on the website describing safety standards?
Good question. Basically, there are two companies. Just like, for example, now Consumer Council being the consumer platform to issue all the reports or the data for the consumer, and they will appoint a different testing lab to do that. And nowadays, because testing lab like SGS, TÜV, and also Vitagen has endorsed the technology, so that B2C platform itself can appoint different testing lab to provide the data. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that our own testing lab ISO accredited. It means that we get audited by the government every year, that the whole operations and everything should be very independent. And the third thing is that you just take an iBanker, for example. The investment bank have the IBD department. They also have the equity research department. So most important is that you have a very clear corporate guideline and governance to make this independent.
Thank you very much. The last question goes to Wesley. The question is, you're already one of the best case companies already. What is your growth plan for the next years to come?
I think we're just getting started. Yeah, it's just a start, you know, and for us, everybody needs a phone case, right? If I still see people that is not using a Casetify, that means, you know, we still have work to do, you know. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you all very much for your contributions. It's been a very interesting discussion. Thank you, and hope to see you again in future.